We're going to call the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting to order this morning. Our case is case number 6120. Mr. Long, if you would like to come to the table here, and while you're doing that, we're going to have Mr. Dixon go ahead and introduce the file to us.
Okay, thank you.
So while we're doing that, you can make your way to the table there in the microphone. Mr. Dixon?
All right, case 6120, an appeal of the zoning administration's notice of violation and related matters. The site is located at 7310 Woodbine Road, Woodbine, Maryland, on property zone A, agricultural district and election district 14. By Stephen Pete Long, Code of Public Local Laws and Ordinances, section 158.030D3. A site visit is tentatively scheduled for January 23rd, 2019 at approximately 9:45 a.m. To file this matter, we have the following documents. Site visits on page 3, minutes. There's a January 16th, 2019 letter from Melvin E. Bale Jr. to Mr. Stephen Pete Long and Miss Gail Kessler in reference to the motion to quash. There are a number of subpoenas that were issued in this case. Hearing notice was posted January 4th, 2019 by Anastasia Yemily, zoning technician. There's January 7th, 2019, notice of public hearing for this case. There's an email from Daniel and Robin Calkin, December 24th, 2018. Notice of public hearing was sent out to the applicant, adjoining property owners, and interested parties, December 21st, 2018. And then there is an application for an appeal of a zoning administration's notice of violation and related matters. There is a investigation progress report from the zoning administration, one of 8 pages. There's an October 23rd, 2018 letter from Jay Voigt to Stephen Long. Then there are a number of photographs in the file. There is a March 9th, 2018 letter from Kirsten Eggerall to Stephen and Lori Long. There's an April 10th, 2018 letter from Jay Voigt to Stephen and Lori Long. There's a May 14th, 2018 letter from Jay Voigt to Stephen and Lori Long. There is an official decision, case ZA 1817. I'm sorry. All right, I would ask that the file be entered into evidence.
Do I have a motion to enter the file into evidence?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, the file will be entered into evidence. Something I failed to do before we got started, if you haven't signed in on the side sheet over there pertaining to this case, please do. All future correspondence will be based on that. And I would ask that if you have any electronic devices, that you would turn them to silence so that you do not interrupt the recording proceedings. Mr. Long, I'm assuming that the first thing, and I had failed to say this to you before the meeting had started, but your first order of business would be to read the email that you sent concerning a motion that you were requesting.
Oh,
So would you like to pursue that? If you don't want to pursue that, that's fine, but if you,
no, I would rather not pursue that.
okay, very good, then there we go. So Mr. Long, with that, again, as I talked to you before the meeting, you're the applicant. You can go ahead and call witnesses. And again, I will remind you that what we're here to do, according to the code, is fences and walls shall be exempt from building line and yard requirements unless they cause obstructions to vision. So that's, yeah, yeah. So that's what we need to concentrate on here today.
Yes, sir.
The other thing is, thank you, Dr. Dunkelberger. If you have either been subpoenaed or intend to testify today, I need you to stand and please take an oath. So if you've been subpoenaed or if you intend to testify, please take the oath. Do you swear or affirm under penalties of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Very good, thank you. You may be seated. So with that, Mr. Long, you can go ahead and give an introductory statement if you would like, and then go ahead and call your witnesses.
Thank you. Mr. Dixon, Mr. Chairman, and other board members, good morning, and thank you for taking the time to hear my appeal. I appreciate that. I'm going to try to keep this simple because it really only has to do with code 158.033. The code listed in the memorandum on the screen and the one on the sign in front of my house is not the one that I've been cited for. And all of the letters from Mr. Voigt, zoning administrator, all of them, there were 3. The other letters had to do with the farm animals. We're not here to talk about the animals, it's just the fence, the line of sight. Code is, and it is 158.043. It's in that file, but I can read it if the board members would prefer that I do so.
Yeah, we have that in front of us, and
Okay.
we have, and I cited 158 dot 130 D3 is what I actually read before we started here. So
Right, but that particular ordinance or code or law was not in any of the letters that I received from Mr. Voigt. The only code that I was in violation of, according to Mr. Voigt, was 158.043. So that's all I'm going to be addressing today. I would like to call Mr. Voigt and Ms. Eggroll.
Okay, so in which order would you like those?
Can they both come at the same time?
That's
Well,
not,
Mr. Voigt then.
yeah, that's not normally the way we
Okay,
do
Mr.
things,
Voigt,
so.
please. Okay. Mr. Voigt, thank you for coming today.
For the record, I failed to say this. For the record, please state your name, address, occupation, and spell for the record your last name.
My name is Jay Voigt, and that's spelled V as in Victor, O-I-G-H-T. I am the zoning administrator for Carroll County, and my address is 225 North Center Street, room 111 in Westminster, 21158.
Thank you.
I received from you, sir, 3 letters regarding the zoning code that I just referenced, 158.043. I also received, in one of your letters, you referenced an acronym, AASHTO, which is not part of the code. The code is very simple. It's only 3 paragraphs, and it says nothing about this AASHTO. Could you please tell me what that stands for, sir?
Okay. Okay, if I remember correctly, it's the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. It's a national organization that finds standards for roadways throughout the nation.
Okay, thank you. I also researched that organization. It has a total of 134 employees nationwide. It is an advisory board. It's not a government agency, not sanctioned by the government agency. In fact, it's a non-governmental organization. Most of the advice that they provide to state government and county governments, it relates to construction of highways. It has nothing to do with existing driveways, use of common driveways, right-of-ways, et cetera. It has to do with the construction of new highways, and for the most part, it's a committee or a board which has absolutely no authority. It's not a federal government authority. It's a non-government organization, but it's to provide advice on the construction of roads, driveways, et cetera. So that particular, the AASHTO guidelines and their recommendations are for construction purposes, has been, I contend, misused. It really plays no role in the violation that I've been cited for. Zero violation, or zero relevance. It's not relevant. The only relevant code is 158.043. So, I would like to present, can Mr. Voigt stay where he's at for now? Or would you have something you'd like to say, Mr. Voigt?
Not at this moment, no.
Okay.
Are you done with Mr. Voigt?
No, I'm not. I do have a few questions.
Yeah, go ahead and finish up, because traditionally, the way things have been done, a witness is called, ask questions, and then the public has the opportunity to ask him questions, then board members, and of his testimony only, not anything that is not relevant to what he had already stated in his testimony. And then you can reserve the right to call them back as a witness later, but that's done very rarely.
Okay, well, let me just finish with Mr. Voigt then.
Okay.
On the 27th of March, the zoning administration office sent one of its officials out, Ms. Eggerl, Kirsten Eggerl, to examine my fence, which was in the process of being constructed.
Is this a question, sir, or?
Well, I'm just a lead up to my question.
Well, just ask a question.
Mr. Roush, but as an applicant, he has the right to make statements and ask
Okay.
questions, so.
So Kirsten Eggerl came out on the 27th of March, and she actually spoke with the foreman of my construction crew that I was paying $600 a day just for labor to build the fence to better contain the animals, which we're not going to talk about. And Miss Eggerl told the foreman that she recommended that they stop building the fence. And they did. So when I came home from work, I was still working. I retired on the 31st of March. They hadn't done very much work on the fence. And I asked the foreman why, and he told me Miss Eggerl had told them that they should stop building the fence because it was probably a violation of the code. So the very next day, on the 28th of March, I called Mr. Voigt to complain that Miss Eggerl had come out to my property without my knowledge or approval and had actually talked to the foreman of the crew and told them that the fence, they should stop working on the fence because it was probably going to be a violation of the code. In the 28, if you have the, do you have the, I'm sorry, the investigation progress report?
Yes,
Okay.
that's part of the file.
If you look at the entry for the 28th, well, the 27th and the 28th of March. 27th was put in by Kirsten Eggerl. She made the annotation to the file, investigation report. But she didn't put anything in there about the fact that she had told the construction foreman that they should stop working on the fence. And I will have some questions for her, but I'll leave that for now. On the 28th, though, if you look at March 28th through 29, again, Kirsten Eggerl made these notes. I actually talked to Mr. Voigt. You remember talking to me, Mr. Voigt?
Yes, sir, I do.
And do you remember that I complained that Kirsten Eggerl had come out and talked to the foreman of my crew and told them to stop construction on the fence?
Yes, you did say about Kirsten coming out and talking to the fence people, but I do believe that she did not tell them to stop. She just told them that it might be a possibility that they should check with their supervisor.
But, well, what I said was she recommended to them that they stop.
I don't know if she recommend, we don't have the authority to make them stop.
No, she didn't make them
Told
stop.
them to, that there might be a problem and they should check with their supervisor.
Okay,
That's
I'll
what I
talk to
remember.
her about that then when I talk to her, when I ask her the
That's fine.
question. Can you tell me, please, why Kirsten Eggerl, and anyway, our conversation went downhill. We sort of became unprofessional, and Mr. Voigt hung up the phone on me. So, but if you look at the investigation report, the entry for the 28th, the day that I talked to Mr. Voigt, was made by Kirsten Eggerl and not by Mr. Voigt. And so Kirsten Eggerl only put in the log what Mr. Voigt had told her. Mr. Voigt, can you tell me why you didn't personally document our conversation?
As I remember it, after getting off the phone with you, there was another customer I ended up dealing with, and I talked to him for a while, and then I got tied up with additional phone calls, later time stuff, and did not get a chance put my comments in that day, and then the next day I'd asked Kirsten, since she would be putting something in, if she would put my comments in on what had happened that day.
Well, don't you think it would have been more accurate if you had actually put the comments in there rather than have her, tell her what the conversation was about and then ask her to make the entry into the investigation report?
The accuracy of it, it would have been the same whether I put it in, because what she put in is what I told her to put in.
Well, what you said was that, that I called to complain about the fence, the questions about the fence. This note, if I could read it, I was away from the office. This is Kirsten writing on behalf of Mr. Voigt. Because I spoke with Mr. Voigt on the 28th, not with Kirsten. In fact, anyway, it reads, I was away from, this is Kirsten talking, I was away from the office on these dates, but Mr. Voigt is Jay, received a return phone call from the property owner. He did not add, he, meaning Mr. Voigt, did not add notes to the record, but said that the property owner was upset that the fence may be an issue. What I was upset about and what I called, the reason that I called was to complain that Kirsten Eggerl came out there without my knowledge or approval and engaged the foreman of my team. That's what I called you to complain about. Does that sound familiar to you?
You did call about, talk about Kirsten coming out and, without your prior approval to your property. I don't specifically remember you complaining about her talking to the fence people, but you might have said that.
Well, I did say that, Mr. Voigt, and I don't doubt that you don't remember that. But I do remember it, because the only reason that I called was because Kirsten Eggerl engaged the foreman of my construction team on the 28th of April, or March. And she had no authority, no right to do that. None. Because the first notice that I received from you about my fence being in violation of 158.043 was on the 10th of April. So about 2 weeks later is when I was informed by you that my fence was, in your estimation, a violation of code 158.043. So a full 2.5 weeks prior to that, Kirsten engaged the foreman of my construction crew and told them that it may be a violation of the code. That's why I called you. That's why I was very irate when I talked to you on the phone, was because I hadn't even been notified that the fence was allegedly a violation of 158.043 until the 10th. So if I could just finish reading this. So the property owner noted that he is recently retired. This is Kirsten writing on behalf of Mr. Voigt. I wasn't retired yet. I retired on the 31st of March. So that was information that, you know, the game about when you whisper something to someone, they tell someone else. By the time it gets to the end of the chain, the story is totally different.
You did tell me that you were retired.
Well, I was getting ready to retire. The 31st of March, I believe, fell on a weekend. So whatever Friday was of that week was my last work day. The property owner also okay, just a minute, please. The conversation deteriorated and the property owner speaking hostilely, and the call was terminated due to this escalation. And then Kirsten continues, I will visit the UIC driveway, using common driveway, Cloudy Drive, that the complaint was called in about and assess the specifics of the situation. Mr. Voigt, do you remember who actually submitted the complaint?
The initial complaint for the whole property came from the Humane Society.
That was about the chickens.
That was originally about the chickens.
And John McBride
And then
complained to the
Mr.
Humane
Mr.
Society about the
McBride,
chickens.
I have listed down here as the complainant. down here is the complaint. Now, I don't remember
Right.
specifically. It was him.
Because at that time, when Mr. McBride, he actually approached the animal control van, which was at Little George's, towards the end of February. And he filed the first complaint about his concern about chickens, a couple of them, being in the street. Well, he lives about 2 foot, okay, all right, let's just continue then, thanks. This is my very good friend and advisor,
I don't know about advisor, but I'm here.
Daryl Booth.
I love this man. He's gonna stick to the fence.
We're brothers from another mother, as we call each other, but we help each other, and he's here to help me stay focused and calm, and I appreciate him for being here. So, the only point I wanted to make, Mr. Voigt, was that I take exception to the fact that you asked Kirsten to make the entry documenting our conversation on 28 March, instead of doing it yourself. It would have been more accurate. Your mind would have been more clear. I mean, in my mind, I forget things all the time now, and it gets worse with age. It would have been better if you had simply made that entry yourself instead of asking Kirsten to do so, because by the time you finished explaining to her the content of our conversation, you could have taken that time to write the notes in there yourself. That's my only point. And I have no more questions for Mr. Boyd.
Okay. Does anyone from the public have any questions of Mr. Voigt's testimony? Okay, and questions of his testimony, okay?
Okay.
If you're going to testify, if you're going to make testimony later, you have that opportunity to make your own testimony, but you need to direct questions towards what he said. So I'm just telling you that before you go to the microphone, sir. So do you have questions of his testimony? Okay, because like I said, you will have the opportunity to go to the microphone and provide your own testimony a little bit later in the proceedings. Okay. Board members, any questions of Mr. Voigt's testimony?
Okay.
Yeah,
Dr. Dunkelberger?
Mr. Voigt, there was reference to this board's recommendation. What is the relevance of that? The board that was referenced, the 3 or 4 letters on roads.
The ASC, is that what you're?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You know what letter was mentioned in?
It's the one that he said was advisory and not regulatory.
Okay, that would be the report from the roads department, probably.
Okay, yeah.
They go by that standard of measurement for site distances to determine when there's obstructions and how far you need to see from any given point on a roadway.
And what is that standard for site distance?
It's based on speed of the driveway, and that standard is basically a measurement taken that's 15 feet back from the edge of the road at a distance of 3.5 feet high, which is approximately the height of a driver sitting in a car. And they measure an object, or they want to see an object down the road at 3.5 feet, which once again is the height of the eye of a driver who would be coming, and when you would first basically see each other. It's designed on the assumed speed limit of the road. There's different distances you have to be to match that standard. For a road at 50 miles an hour, you have to be 570 feet away between the point where they're measuring from to where you can first see an oncoming car. And like I say, and that's the national standard that they use to determine sight distance for pulling out onto a road.
And in this case, there's a stop sign there. So what would the sight distance be for a stopped vehicle?
Well, like I say, the It's not the stop bar or the stop sign necessarily. It's measured from the edge of the road back 15 feet. So it's a lot of times what's called the stop bar is a white bar where you're supposed to stop at. That's not where it's measured from. It's measured from the edge of the road back 15 feet and then up 3.5 feet, which is where someone would be sitting in a car.
And there isn't no stop sign there on Cloudy Drive because that's a use in common. That's not a publicly.
There's a road sign there, but there's no stop sign.
Okay, thank you.
Can I please add something, Dr. Dunkelberger?
Yeah.
I want to reiterate that standard recommended by the American Association of State Highway Officials, or AASHO, is only recommendations, and these recommendations are guidelines which are used in highway design and construction throughout the United States. That's straight from their website, and that's where I learned that they have only 134 employees. It's a non-governmental organization. It has absolutely no authority. And that may be the standard that they are misapplying in this case, but it's not part of the code. I'm only here to talk about the code. So the guidelines for new construction of driveways, highways, et cetera, and the site distance that go with it are recommendations by a non-governmental organization that Highways has adopted, but they didn't put it into the code. It's not part of the law.
Okay, Ms. Eckert.
I have a follow-up question to Dr. Dunkelberger's question. Mr. Voigt, you indicated that it was based on the road standards. I'm assuming that to be Carroll County Bureau of Roads Operations, which
Yes.
is referenced in this
Yes,
ordinance. And this is their standard for
measuring site distance from coming into
throughout Carroll County.
throughout the county.
Thank you.
So does that mean, in fact, the Carroll County Road Department has adopted the ASHTO recommended site distance
As far as
as their standard site distance?
As far as, like I said, I don't work for the roads department per se, but my understanding is that's the standard that they use to determine, that they've adopted and used to determine site distance on county-maintained and roads throughout the county.
So let me see if I have this right. This ASHTO, ASHTO, recommends certain standards for road construction and maintenance.
Correct.
Yeah. And that governmental authorities, be they state or local, sometimes adopt some or all of those recommendations as their own, as the standards by which they will operate.
Correct.
And it's your understanding that as far as setback requirements are concerned, that the Carroll County Roads Department have adopted the recommended ASHTO standard.
As far as I know, yes, they have. That's the standard
So,
they've been
so
using.
in essence, it's a recommendation of a non-binding body, but it's been incorporated into the standard road manual for the Carroll County Roads Department.
My understanding, yes.
Mr. Simmons.
I would just like to comment, having looked recently, within the last few minutes, at the file, those standards are included in the file. They're about 10 pages long. It's part of the record.
I just wanted it on the record that that's what it.
I understand completely.
Commissioner Roush, could I?
And as I read this ordinance,
It's in the very back.
'43, 158, 043A, It's, which causes an obstruction to vision for motorists entering for motorists entering publicly maintained roads. Is that correct? That's,
Correct.
and, the determination of this ordinance does not specifically state what a standard for that should be.
No, it's, the way it's written, it says the zoning administrator, in conjunction with the Carroll County Bureau of Roads, will determine whether an object is an obstruction or not. The way it works is if we think there's a problem or a concern with some type of obstruction or something, it's not up to us to actually determine there's an obstruction. We call the Carroll County Roads Department out, and we meet them out there. They have they usually send an area road supervisor out, and they're the ones who do the measurements and determine if there's a obstruction or not. And then if there is an obstruction, then we'll go forward with, trying to get it corrected.
And was that done in this case?
Yes.
So,
Can you cite, do you have that documentation in front of you? Can you,
ASHTO standards? Yes.
that were applied in this particular case and the measurements that the people from the Carroll County Roads Department used in determining that there was a visual obstruction? And what those actual numbers were, it would be very helpful.
We have, this is a copy of, it's called driveway site distance form that they use. And they highlighted on here the speed limit of the road.
Before you go any further, Mr. Voigt, is that part of the file here? Is that part
Yes,
of the
it is.
59 pages?
Yes, it
Could
is
you
part of the file.
Could you reference?
It's probably about the fourth or fifth page from the end of this.
From the end, okay.
It's a form, it appears of this nature.
Mr. Voigt, would you hold that up again, please?
driveways like this.
Yes, that is you're on the right page there, guys.
Thank you.
And like I say, on that form, they've highlighted a couple of different things. One, they state that it's one lane that they are using, it's a one-lane road. They state the highlighted speed limit, which was 30 miles an hour. And the sight distance, there's an assumed design speed, but then there's the distance that they use, 445 feet, is what you need to see to meet the sight distance requirement.
On this site?
On this site, yes. So if you measured back 15 feet from the edge of the road and up 3.5 feet, as is the standard, you would need to be able to see an object at 3.5 feet off the road at 445 feet would be the minimum sight distance for that speed limit and for that intersection or road.
No. Do we have any other questions of Mr. Voigt's testimony?
I have a question, sir.
Wait,
Okay,
we'll
I'm
get
sorry.
you. We'll
Sorry
let
to
you,
interrupt.
go ahead. That would be a recross. We'll go
Okay.
ahead and let Mr. Simmons.
Thank you, sir.
Did the supervisor from County Roads make an actual visit and do those calculations?
As far as I understand, my inspector, Kirsten, met with them out there whenever they take the measurements for
Okay.
that.
I presume Kirsten's going to testify? Yes. So we can ask her, did that actually take place?
Yes.
Was there a recommendation by that supervisor from County Roads?
His recommendation that, yes, there was an obstruction of vision and that the fence needed to be moved back to eliminate it.
Okay. Thank you.
You said that you needed to be able to see 445 feet. Do you know if they determined exactly how far one could see?
I don't know how that distance, I don't remember that being in any of their reports or anything.
Okay.
What you actually can see from there. I do know that if you measure the 15 feet back, from what I would estimate, looking into the fence is right next to the driveway, so it might be 20 feet from the center of the road to the driveway to the fence, and where you would be measuring from.
Thank you.
Any other questions on Mr. Voigt's testimony?
Recross.
Okay. Mr. Long?
Mr. Chairman, I only want to reiterate that AASHTO.
Question.
Question
Mr.
is,
No, he doesn't need a question.
He's
That's-
quick.
It's just time for him to question Mr. Voigt's testimony, isn't
Yeah,
it?
well, he can
I'm
refute
rebutting what
that. He's
Mr. Voigt
rebutting.
said.
So, since he's representing himself, Mr. Rao.
Oh, okay.
it doesn't matter that there are 10 pages or so in the 59-page document about AASHTO standards that the Highway Department has misapplied. That's not part of the law, number one. Number two, the code says the zoning administrator shall determine in conjunction with the Carroll County Bureau of Roads Operations or its successor agency whether an object constitutes an obstruction to vision. That is the only paragraph in this three-paragraph code that I take exception to. It's very unconstitutional. If you could put that kind of a comment, then you wouldn't need any laws. You would just say, the zoning administrator or this administrator in conjunction with this individual will determine the following. That basically takes the power out of the hands of the people and puts it into the hands of the government. But the other thing misapplication of that so-called recommended standard, but for new construction. Cloudy Drive has been there for longer than I've been in my house for 18 years. And Cloudy Drive, I don't know when that road was put in, but it wasn't new construction. So the standards of AASHTO have been misapplied. Yes, they're documented in the file. No, they are not part of the code. Now, the other question I have, Mr. Voigt, for you, sir, is inasmuch as this code says that you, in conjunction with the Bureau of Roads Operations, will make a determination about whether or not, what constitutes obstruction to vision. Have you ever been to my site?
I have been I haven't been on your property.
Okay,
I have stopped at Cloudy Drive and taken a look to see what was there.
okay.
But yes.
So how did you
been down
make the
to site.
determination then, in conjunction with roads operations, that my fence constituted an obstruction to vision?
Oh, I had my inspector meet with roads department down there on site when they did the measurements and everything. And my inspector is my representative on site when events take place. And like I say, the roads department took their measurements and determined that there was an obstruction, and that's what we go by.
Okay, but again, the measurements, site distance, that very convoluted algebraic equation that I don't think anyone in the county could solve. It's a mathematical formula as to how they arrive at those distances, AASHTO. So their recommended standard for new construction has been misapplied. It's not part of the code. It's not a law.
Well, you keep referring to new construction. When Cloudy Drive was constructed, it apparently met those standards when it was constructed. And then by putting the fence up, you created the obstruction after it was created. So therefore, Cloudy Drive no longer met that standard. So therefore, it's in violation.
But when you say violation, that implies in violation of a law, of a
Well,
code.
it is a violation because, as it says here, in Section A of that code, it says a property owner or tenant of the property shall not maintain or erect a fence, wall, mailbox, hedge on private property at or near any existing access point, which would be Cloudy Drive, or proposed access point. So it's, in our code, it's taken both new construction and existing.
Okay,
And specifically states that a property owner shall not erect or maintain a fence that is causing an obstruction to a entrance onto a road.
okay. Point well made. And then, it's not part of the code, that AASHTO, the guidelines. However, there now is a question as to, it's a judgment call. Whether they use that standard or not, my fence, in my opinion, and Mr. Wooten, which I'm not going to put him on the spot, and many others that I have asked to look at the 3 entrance points on the Woodbine Road. No, everybody agrees that my fence does not obstruct your vision. I would like to, at this point, submit my photographs, because Mr. Voigt, in the same way that he delegated his responsibility to Kirsten Eggerl when it came to documenting our conversation, you also delegated your authority and responsibility for making this decision to Kirsten Eggerl. So,
No, sir, that decision was up to the roads department, to determine whether an obstruction, it wasn't up to Kirsten.
but it said
Kirsten
that
came back
you,
and told me what the results was, and it's my decision on whether it constitutes an obstruction. With
Okay, but-
support from the roads and from the information that Kirsten gave me, yes, I have determined that it's an obstruction vision coming
based
onto the
on the
road.
information that Kirsten gave you.
Kirsten and the roads department, which
Okay,
is what.
but this
basically-
doesn't say, it says zoning administrator.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one zoning administrator, Mr. Voigt, and that's you.
That's correct. And like I say, I have a staff of inspectors that fall under my purview in my office that do inspections on all our investigations and have the authority to do that. And that authority is granted to them through me as their supervisor. And they report back to me. And generally, my inspectors, they make a lot of decisions on their own, but all their decisions are backed up by me through my office and through my position.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, board members, I have no further questions for Mr. Voigt.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Voigt. At this point, Mr. Long, do you have, would you like to call another witness?
At this point, sir, if I may, I would like to submit my own photographs.
Okay, go ahead and bring the photographs up and give them to Mr. Dixon. Mr. Dixon, do you want to, I'm assuming that we'll enter these into evidence as one exhibit. Would that be okay with you, Mr. Long, is it, how many photographs are we looking at?
I don't know, I haven't counted them,
Six?
maybe 10, but I want to submit them one at a time.
Okay.
Because they're not marked.
Okay, go ahead,
Otherwise, it
go
won't
ahead and
make sense
submit
to you.
them to Mr. Dixon, one at a time. We'll enter them into evidence.
And then Mr. Dixon will mark them.
Yeah, Mr. Dixon will mark them.
Okay,
So-
thank you, sir. Mr. Dixon and board members, I would like to do this one at a time because as I noted, the pictures aren't marked.
Okay, and he will mark them.
Okay. This is a picture from Cloudy Drive taken from my,
Why don't we do this, Mr. Long?
okay.
I'll mark them and put the number on it, and then you refer to the number when you're talking to the board, so they'll know
Okay.
what you're talking about.
All right, sir.
All right, so this will be. Just give them to us. So I put-
Ma'am, I understand your comment you said about being
put-
able to
I put
see the
one.
pictures. Unfortunately, we do not have an overhead
I'm giving it to
projector
you.
that could project that image out. So you'll just have to bear with us if you will, okay?
Maybe anybody else see him could come up with, see about the capacity.
No, we'll just keep them here.
Is that it?
For now.
I'm good, but I can go anytime because I'm
Okay.
very articulate.
Okay, maybe after Mr. Long goes through this, we'll take a quick.
That's good.
After you get through the photographs, Mr. Long, I think maybe we'll take a quick 5-minute
Okay.
break, if you don't mind.
Right at this time, I'm only going to be submitting 5 pictures.
Okay?
Because the only complaint, the only formal complaint from John McBride was about, from Cloudy Drive. And Mr. McBride lives about 2 football fields to the west of this point. The first exhibit,
Okay, I'll tell you what, how about if you give us, go ahead and leave these photographs there. You have your own photographs?
I don't have the copies of these, that's why.
You don't? Oh,
if I
okay.
could Just,
Could I have you stand a little bit closer to the end of the microphone there?
this is Exhibit 1, and this is a picture taken from my wife's vehicle looking south on Woodbine Drive.
Is that left or right?
It's a right from Cloudy Drive.
Right.
Because the fence is on the south side of Cloudy Drive. The north side of Cloudy Drive has no fence. And I've included some photographs of that as well. This is the picture, whoops, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. That is looking south on Cloudy Drive. I will only submit 2 at this time.
Okay.
The others are somewhat redundant. This is the picture looking to the north on Cloudy Drive.
This is Cloudy Drive, right here.
Yes. That is the end of Cloudy Drive,
Looking left.
looking left or looking
what number
north,
is that?
which is where the majority of the traffic comes from.
And this is
in the morning.
Exhibit 4.
Okay.
That's Exhibit 4, okay. I have duplicates of some that it will just confuse the matter. You have a photograph of one, sir?
It's any part of her car in
In
the main
street?
road.
No, sir, it is not.
What kind of car is that?
That is a RAV4 Toyota. And, I actually took the car, my wife wasn't in the car. I parked the car. And actually, this is a picture of the parked car, with me not in the car. But the picture looking to the south,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Is that, so,
that's exhibit, that's the car. The question was if the car was in the street, and the answer was no.
so when this car was parked, that's the same time you took that photo, Exhibit 1 that we saw?
Yes, I believe so. I just took these pictures yesterday. And I've taken other pictures. I took maybe 60 pictures, but only printed 40 of them. And I'm only submitting.
So, does that mean that the seat of that car is 15 feet back from the edge of the road?
No, sir, it does not. But again, that's a standard, a recommended standard that has been misapplied and adopted by highways. It's not part of the code.
But it has been adopted, you said. So you recognize that it's been adopted by
Highways has
highway.
adopted this recommended standard.
Yes, they have.
But it's been misapplied.
I don't know, 15 feet sounds like, 5 yards to me, no matter how you measure it.
Right, but if you're familiar with Woodbine Road, Woodbine Road was at one time a country road. It's a very old highway now. it was a country road, now it's become
This is
a
farther back.
thoroughfare.
You don't-
Early in the morning, traffic from the north going south, and late at night, traffic coming from the south going back home to the north. If you apply that, there are probably over 100 cases in Carroll County where this standard that Rhodes has adopted are in violation of that standard. The only thing missing is the
So
complaint.
let me see. Your violation shouldn't count because there's another violation someplace else?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
But what are you saying?
What I'm saying is that the violation is, it has two parts. It's all complaint driven.
Indeed it is.
The highways and zoning don't go out and look for violations.
That's true.
They only act on
Complaints.
complaints. My contention is that Mr. McBride had a vendetta against me because we had some discussions in the past. And first he
So,
talked to animal
so
control.
what? So I don't, his
His-
motivation
Right.
in making the complaint isn't of issue here. The fact is he made a complaint, right?
Okay, that's
And
fine.
and the zoning administrator acted on the complaint. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Now,
And this notice of violation was the result of his inspection, or his inspector's inspection, following up on that complaint. Is that right?
well, yes.
Is that right?
It is.
Okay.
I will, of course, when Mr. McBride speaks to the board, we'll have some questions for him as well.
What do you want to finish with?
Yes, I'll finish with that. These are pictures to the north. This is Exhibit 5. I think you already have one.
Yes, we do.
The other thing, the reason I took this particular picture, the last one, is because in the investigation report, Kirsten Negro said that it was only a couple of feet from the fence to the road, which is not true. It's at least 7 feet. That's more than a couple. So she just, why she chose a couple of feet, I don't know.
Mr. Long?
Yes, sir.
I'm looking at exhibits 1 and 3, the two photos looking south, right?
I believe so.
Okay. Now, did I understand you to say that in this exhibit picture, the car has a pretty clear view down, is that Woodbine?
Yeah.
South.
Yeah.
Yes. The reason I brought this picture is, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Doctor. I used that picture because there's a car
Yes, yeah.
in there, which you can clearly see when you're sitting. If that car had been there when I was sitting inside my car, this one going north. The point that I was trying to make is that, and Mr. McBride's complaint was that my fence was obstructing his view of northbound traffic when he wanted to make a left-hand turn. Making a right-hand turn, because you're looking to the left, where the traffic is coming closest to the fence, there's no fence there. You see the pictures to the north.
Did I understand you to say that these two photos were taken when your wife's vehicle was in the same spot?
I can only say for sure, because I took a bunch of pictures yesterday. And I know that when I took that picture there from inside the car,
This one.
I parked my car, and it was maybe not quite as far back as that picture shows, but it was not over that white line. That I am
Well,
testifying to the accuracy of that statement.
help me understand. In this picture, the fence and the Cloudy Drive street sign is over the hood of the car, correct?
Well, that's not really true, because it's about 7 feet from the road to the fence, and
No, it's in line with the hood.
It's actually in line more with the passenger window.
That's not what the picture shows. This one does.
Okay, well then let me
But-
just withdraw this one because it's misleading. The only reason I took this picture was because there's a car that's going south and there's a car that's coming north. My point is that wherever you stop the first time, traffic, whether it's 15 feet, 20 feet, whatever, before you actually go out and make that turn, you're gonna pull all the way out because there's blind spots.
Okay. In this
Telephone
picture,
poles, mailboxes, trees, bushes, etc.
in Exhibit 3, the fence is in line with the hood of the car. In Exhibit 1, the fence is in line with the passenger's window.
Okay.
This vehicle is not in the same spot.
Well, it's in approximately the same spot. I can only assure you that I parked the vehicle, got out of the vehicle, and I went and I looked at the line. And I didn't bring all my pictures with me, unfortunately. So that one, I will withdraw this one. I'm just
Yeah,
using.
we've already entered those into.
Okay, that's fine.
Into evidence.
I can only assure you that when you make your final stop, before you make the left-hand turn, you're as close to that white line as you can be, because you want to have a good view of the traffic, so there's no blind spots. And in order to negotiate that turn, whether you go left or right, you need to be right where I'm sitting in that car to see the traffic. The traffic coming from the north is the closest to my fence, the closest to me. So, and there's no problem with seeing traffic coming from the north, going south.
And why is that?
Because there's no fence on the north side of Cloudy Drive, sir.
Oh, okay. So it's the fence that provides the obstruction of the view.
Well, that's not what I said.
Well, you said there was no obstruction of view because there was no fence.
Well,
So-
the fence doesn't come into play on the north side of the,
No, so there's no obstruction of view going to the north.
except for Mr. Dorsey's tree, his bushes in the summertime. There are many obstructions, telephone poles, mailboxes, etc., even
So-
looking north.
So you're equating the mailbox and telephone pole as an obstruction
Yes, sir, I am.
to your fence.
I'm only saying, I'm not equating them, I'm only saying that there are obstructions looking north from telephone poles.
So are you saying there are different degrees of obstruction? I mean, sounds like the telephone
That's what
pole
you're saying.
and the mailbox are minor obstructions.
No, I'm not
However,
going to.
which don't impede your view to the
I'm
to the
not
north,
going
is that
to
right?
Say if it's a minor or a major obstruction. My only point is that there are many obstructions to your view, anywhere in this world, anywhere in this county, anywhere on Woodbine Road. And those obstructions, I have taken tons of pictures of intersections and driveways where there are man-made and natural obstructions, like hills. And this standard of 450 feet, there are not very many places on Woodbine Road where you have a view of 450 feet, looking north or south, because the road, I mean, the cars disappear when the road goes downhill.
Okay, do we have any more questions of Mr. Long's photographs that he entered into evidence?
Okay, I'm not going to enter any more photographs because the only formal complaint was about Cloudy Drive.
Yeah.
John, right, if it weren't for his complaint, we wouldn't be here.
So would you like to call your next witness?
Yes, sir, I would
You
like
Go
to
go ahead
call.
and get to the microphone though, please.
You gotta take a break.
You want to take a break?
Whatever you,
Mr. Long, before we do that, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break if you don't
Okay,
mind.
that would be great, thank you.
Okay. We're going to call the BZA back to order. Mr. Long, I think in the essence of time, you're going to call Mr. Miller as your,
Well, sir, my advisor, Daryl, has reminded me that we're here only to talk about the fence, 158.043, not about the chickens in the road, not about the complaint to the animal control officer at Little George's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I built the fence to better contain the birds. So I'm sorry, Mark, for keeping you, and I forgot your name. Karen Baker. I know who you are. We've talked, or at least emailed. I'm sorry for wasting your time because I don't want to go down that road about the birds because the birds are, one, contained, and two, very limited now. So please accept my apology for keeping you here so long. And I hope you have a good day. Be careful out there in the snow.
you're excused, so go ahead. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Long.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, would you like to call your next witness?
Yes, sir, I would. Kirsten Eggerl.
Okay. Ms. Engel, would you please come to the table? While you're coming, I'll remind you your name, your address, occupation, and spell for the record your last name.
Good morning,
And-
board
and-
members.
And make sure you speak into the microphone.
Pull it up to you.
And Mr. Long, pull your microphone a little bit closer too, so that we can, sometimes you kind of trail off and get a little
Okay,
quiet. So
sorry.
that we get every word on the recording.
I'm a rookie at this. I'm not used to talking into a microphone.
Okay,
Good morning, board members. It's Kirsten Agrel. My address here is 225 North Center Street. I work with Department of Land and Resource Management. My last name spelled out is Egggerl. I was in relation to this event, I was a zoning technician for a zoning office.
okay. If you could just maybe pull that a little bit closer.
Sure. Is it even,
And speak right up.
Yeah,
okay. That's
yeah, we're good. Okay, Mr. Long, your witness.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Eggerl, it's so nice to meet you in person. We've talked on the phone
Yes.
at least once.
I think just once.
Yeah, one time, and you were very pleasant to speak with when we were talking about the birds and the variance request, et cetera.
Yes.
The only question that I have for you, ma'am, is on the 27th of March, when you came out to where the fence is, Cloudy Drive, in your entry into the investigation report, the last sentence says, "The team installing the fence were on site when I arrived, and we discussed this matter briefly." Could you please tell me what it was that you discussed?
The way that I spoke with them at all is I had gone to the front door and nobody answered the door. I saw two people working on the fence. I thought maybe one of them was the property owner. We had only spoken by phone once. I didn't know what he looked like. So I went over to them to see if they were the property owner, and they said, "No, but what can we help you with?" I explained that the fence might be an issue for sight distance. And they said that it was a expensive fence and a lot of work to do, and they didn't want to take it back down. I said, well, if it turns out that it is, that might be a possibility that might occur. And then I told them I would leave, call the property owner, and they should await any phone calls from the property owner at that time. I did not tell them to stop doing the fence. I did not recommend them that they should not complete the fence. I'm not sure where that came up. Perhaps that was a decision they made themselves if they did act on that. I told them I'd be in touch with the property owner and they should await any further communication from him.
Okay. Now, I believe when we talked, I asked that the next time that you come out, that you call ahead and let me know. This was when it had to do with the number of chickens.
The property owner and myself spoke once on the phone. That did not come up at that time. From my understanding, and as detailed in the report here, that conversation was held with Jay Voigt when I was out of the office, which the conversation they spoke of earlier on March 28th or 29th, when he had called after my fence visit. And then he said that the note in here is the property owner also noted that he is recently retired and that a call should be made before accessing the property. From that date, we respected that.
From that date, you what?
Respected that
Thank you.
request to call before accessing. In fact, I don't know if we've been on the property since that date.
Okay. It says here that on one of the days, you met with John McBride, Mr. McBride. Do you remember that, meeting with Mr. McBride?
I remember meeting with Jim Cook of Roads Department. He was speaking to somebody next to the property. We met on Cloudy Drive. He was talking to somebody on Cloudy Drive, and we exited from Cloudy Drive, but we did not access his property, the property owner's property.
Do you remember speaking with Mr. McBride at all?
There were a couple neighbors present, or there was a neighbor present, and then there were two other neighbors that arrived after I had arrived. Jim Cook was speaking with somebody on the property. I don't recall who that was. If I could look at my notes here. When I arrived at Cloudy Drive, this says, Mr. McBride was talking with Jim. So it must have been Mr. McBride that was there presently, and then later on, there were other neighbors that arrived, the Dorseys.
Okay. I appreciate your testimony. The only thing that I would like to add is that there are only 3 people that use that using common driveway. 2 of them are here, Mr. McBride and, I forgot your name. I'm sorry? Are you on the end of Cloudy Drive?
But,
Oh, I'm
direct,
sorry.
so, we can get to her later.
There are 3 people that live on Cloudy Drive, about 2 football fields west of the intersection that you've seen photographs of. Mr. Dorsey and Mrs. Dorsey, sitting to the right of Mr. McBride, do not use that use in common driveway. So part of the reason that I built the fence was because Mr. Dorsey continuously complained to me about the chickens that were going over onto his property, which is to the north of my property, and to his rental property to the south of my house. So I'm sandwiched between 2 properties that are owned by Mr. Dorsey. And so in trying to, and we went back and forth. I was still working. I was in a hurry to get to work, and all he wanted to do, he said, you deal with it, you fix it, or I will, the chickens. I said, give me time. I'm still working. I will fix it. I will build a fence. And so when I built the fence, it was actually Mrs. Dorsey. I don't remember if she remembered. I'm sorry. She actually went by as I was putting the fence so it couldn't go over there. And I had already built the fence so it couldn't go to the rental property. She thanked me. Mrs. Dorsey thanked me for building the fence. And yet Mr. Dorsey opined on the Cloudy Drive issue, even though he doesn't use the use in common driveway. So on the one hand, he complained about the chickens, and when I built the fence, Mr. Dorsey, behind my back, complained about the fence, but Mrs. Dorsey thanked me. The rental property to the south of where I live, the people that are in the house now are very nice people, unlike the people that lived there for 15 years. They would send their dog over onto my property to do its business on my property. And I witnessed that, my kids witnessed that, my wife witnessed it. I never complained. But when Mr. Dorsey started complaining about the chickens, I brought that issue up. Those people have since moved. The only formal complaint is from Mr. McBride.
Mr.
And
Long.
again, we're here for the fence,
Okay.
so.
Mr. Long, Ms. Zegral has a job to do, and we'd like her to get back to it, since we're all paying.
Yes, sir.
Her services, so, are you done with her?
I am, yes, sir, I am finished.
Okay, does anyone from the public have any questions of her testimony? Of her testimony, not your own testimony, but questions of what she said? You'll,
Have him come to the mic.
go ahead, go to the microphone. We'll find out whether, yeah, go to the standing microphone if you would, please. And please identify yourself, your address, your occupation, and for the record, spell your last name.
John McBride, McBride. I live at 1800 Cloudy Drive, Woodbine, Maryland, 21797. And the one biggest question I have to ask, since Christian come out there and measured it and all this kind of stuff, why didn't somebody mention to him, have you ever had this property surveyed? And I'm sure his answer would be no.
Okay, so is that question for her?
No, that's, well, for her also,
And
and also Mr. Long.
can you answer that, or is that?
I got the plat right.
Well,
I put
yeah,
it
but
with me.
you're asking her a question. Can you accurately answer that, or is that outside of your purview, or?
I can speak for the zoning code that does not have requirements for setbacks for fences. Therefore, a fence can't violate a setback, wouldn't be in violation, they can build up to the property lines. Assessing where a property line is a responsibility of the property owner. If a discrepancy was in place, it would be an issue between two neighbors to address that discrepancy.
So you heard her answer. It's not really, it doesn't fall on the zoning administration office. It falls on, the responsibility falls on the landowners that are in dispute of where the property line may or may not be.
Okay, well then, Mr. Long, can he answer that question? He had the property surveyed.
But, yeah, but you're asking questions of her testimony. You'll have the opportunity to make your own testimony later, okay? I promise you.
Okay, thank you.
Board members, any questions of the testimony we've heard?
No.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're free to leave.
Mr. Voigt, you have a question? Could you come to the microphone first?
My name is Jay Voigt, I'm zoning administrator for county. I don't particularly have a question, but if, I was wondering if Ms. Eggroll's testimony is completed, if she'd be dismissed, or does she need to stay for recall?
Mr. Long, do you have any intention of calling her back to
No,
recall?
sir, I have no intention.
Okay.
I would
Ms.
ask if
Eggroll,
she could
thank
get back
you
to work and be
for coming
dismissed.
today.
Thank
It's
you.
nice to meet you in person.
Okay, very good. Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
Okay, Mr. Long, would you like to call your next witness?
Not at this time, no, sir. I have no more questions for anyone unless somebody decides they want to testify.
Okay. Now, at this point in time, anyone from the audience can come to the microphone and they can offer testimony, as Mr. Long has done. So if you want to come to the microphone, and again, what we're here to do is we're looking at the sight distance on the fence, and that's our narrow charge with what we're here to do. So if anyone would like to make testimony, please go to the microphone. Again, your name, address, occupation, and spell for the record your last name.
Hello, my name is Renee.
A little bit closer to the microphone.
Hello, my name is Renee Fromeyer, Frommeyer. I live at 1790 Cloudy Drive, Woodbine, Maryland, 21797. I've lived there for over 30 years.
Ma'am, could you pull it down just a little bit closer to your mouth?
Yep. Yeah, why is the mic sideways?
Hello,
Could
can you hear now?
Could you,
Come on, sit down.
All right.
Would you like to sit down at this front mic here?
Is that better? Can you hear better?
yes, very good.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Do I need to repeat anything that
No.
I said? Okay. I find if Mr. Long is a concerned neighbor, I have concerns for my family, myself, my neighbors, because of the danger of going on to Woodbine Road from Cloudy Drive. You have to get down into Woodbine Road to see what's coming from the right, to make a left-hand turner. Does it take somebody to get hurt in an accident before something's done? It is a danger. I would invite any one of you to come down Cloudy Drive to try to make that turn and see how dangerous it is. And if he can't just as a good person see that and understand that and take care of the problem, I just don't understand that. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, does anyone in the audience have any questions of her testimony?
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
No, please take the microphone, I'm sorry. You don't get off that easy.
And I'm ready to answer any questions you have.
So, anyone in the audience, including you, Mr. Long, and then board members will have an opportunity to ask.
And I
questions.
took a day off work to address this because I feel it's so important.
We
I'm
appreciate
not
that.
retired, I work, and I rely on myself.
Board members?
Mr. Chairman, Board members, I have no questions. I would like to,
Well, you'll have the opportunity in your summation comments to
okay, I have
do
no
that. So
questions.
you have no questions
No,
on her
sir.
testimony. Okay, board members, question of Ms. Frommeyer's testimony.
Do you know if there have been any accidents at Cloudy and Woodbine Road?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
You're not aware of, and you've been there for 30 years?
Yes. But that fence has not been there for 30
No,
years.
I understand that. I think that that's absolutely miraculous.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
During all the speeders that go down Woodbine Road, it's 30
Yeah.
miles an hour, and they go 50 miles an hour.
well, that was my next question. Thank you for
Yeah, you can make a
superseding
lot of
me.
money. You put a speed camera there, you can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
I've called the state police, and I've offered them to sit in my driveway, and they have, to get speeders. And people going, when they're supposed to be doing 30 and they're going 50, and trying to make a left, you have to get out into the road, and to see. And I was looking through the slats of the fence to see, but then he put bushes there, so you can't even look through the slats of the fence, which is not a good way to see oncoming traffic, is through slats of fence.
Is it more difficult well, I would guess it's difficult in the morning with people going south and difficult in the evening with people going
I'm a
north.
virtual worker. I work from home, and it's bad anytime. My son is a nurse. He lives with me, and he has difficulty turning. He's 21 years old, and he has issues with that.
Okay, thank you. I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate you taking the time.
Any
Okay,
other
and what-
questions? Wait a minute, come back to the microphone. Okay. Board members, any other questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Do you use Cloudy as the exclusive way you exit your property?
That's the only way to get out to the main road. It's a private road. It's the only way to get out to Woodbine Road.
We turned on to Cloudy and then
We went down
went
the
back
end.
and turned around.
Are there
somewhat,
two houses at the bottom of Cloudy?
There's 3 houses.
Three?
Uh-huh.
We went there.
Pardon me?
We went there.
Okay, great. Well, then you should have seen that it's not easy to make a left-hand turn.
Okay.
you saw the fence.
Stone Road.
Taking the picture.
You're confused.
Could you spell your first and last name again?
Renee is my first name. Fromeyer. Foxtrot, Romeo, Oscar, Mother, Echo, Yankee, Echo, Romeo.
F-R-O-M-M.
Would you like me to do that again?
Love these military types.
How about Renee?
Renee, R-E-N-E-E-E.
Okay.
And it affects more than just the people that live back there. It's our family, our friends who come to visit. It's many more people than just the 5 people that live back there.
Okay.
Any other questions of her testimony? You may now be seated.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to provide testimony? Please go to the microphone and get to the microphone. Name, address,
Okay.
occupation, and spell for the record your last name.
My name's Carol Dorsey, D-O-R-S-E-Y, and I live at 7256 Woodbine Road, Woodbine. And I'm a landlord, and we own the property on the other side of Pete. And
The other side, on the other side.
On the other side would
To the
be-
north or to the south?
on the south side, sorry,
South side, okay, very good, thank you.
because I live on the north side, so it'd be the south.
So you live on the north side and you also own a property
Yeah,
on the south
I
side?
sort of surround him,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
And there are approximately, I'd say about 10,000 cars a day that go up and down Woodbine Road. It is an access to Route 70. It's a 30-mile speed limit through there. People travel anywhere from 40 to 60 through that area. And when you are pulling out and you want to make a left-hand turn, you have to pull almost halfway out in the road to be able to see what is coming because of the fence. I have at least 3 3 or 4 people who live on that property that cannot see if they come down the one driveway. So, I mean, it is really dangerous trying to pull out on Woodbine Road. Whether there's a fence or whether there isn't a fence, it's still dangerous. The fence makes it worse. Thank you.
Okay, anyone in the audience have any questions of Mrs. Dorsey's testimony?
Mrs. Dorsey, just one question. Do you ever use the Cloudy Drive access point to get on?
Yes, we do.
How often would you say?
Not very often, but when we have to bring the truck in, yes, we do.
But you could also go to.
But
your
it's
own-
also the fence on the other side, on the right-of-way side, we use that. And yes, it is dangerous.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the only thing that I would like to say is that we're only here because there was a formal complaint by John McBride about the Cloudy Drive access. The property to the south, the rental property, there was no formal complaint made about that access point, number one. Number two, that driveway is also shared. It's shared between me and the people living in the big rental house and the two other renters on that rather small property. And they have their own driveway further to the south that they use and have always used more often than the shared driveway because it's a better driveway. It's got asphalt on it. It's easier to clear. It's just a better driveway. I can't afford that kind of a driveway on my property. So that's all I wanted to say, is that the only issue is Cloudy Drive. There was no formal complaint about the other shared driveway to the south of my property where the rental property is located.
Okay. Any questions from board members of Mrs. Dorsey's testimony? Okay, Mrs. Dorsey, you can take a seat.
All right, thank you.
Okay, does anyone else from the audience have any testimony to give?
Do you need my
And
name again or not?
Name, address, occupation, and spell for the record your last name.
John McBride, McBride, 1800 Cloudy Drive, Woodbine, Maryland. I don't work, I'm retired. And as we were talking about this, I go out driveway all times of day and all times of night. I go out, I start out, the first thing I do is look north, because that's where I can see the furthest down the road. If there's no cars coming, then I can pull out and look to the left or to the south. And then I can go ahead and make sure there's no traffic coming down there. But a lot of times during the rush hours and coming home times and stuff like that, I can't do that. So I've had to back up probably anywhere from 80 to 100 times, because I would pull out, and then all of a sudden I see cars coming the other way, and I don't know how fast they're going, so I back out the road, because I'm sitting at about, I'd say around 25 to 30 feet maybe, out in the middle of the road, so I can see down the other way, so I can see real good. And plus, when the cars are coming down, after they go by me, you have to wait probably around maybe, I'd say 30 seconds or so, so all the cars down that way get out of the way so you can see down further down the road. And that's about all I can, but that's my biggest problem about that. That's why I made the complaint, and I also sent you all the photograph. So, I mean, my photograph, I was inside the car, as you can probably see, because you can see my handrail, door closing rail, and all that kind of stuff. So that's no problem. I don't know what his pictures look like. He was probably, way he was talking, he said he was outside the car taking pictures. That's not going to do any good. You got to be inside the car looking down the road. That's what you're going to look for.
We had both. We had outside the car and pictures from inside.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Any more? That's
Any questions of, I don't mean to cut you off, are you finished? Okay, any questions of Mr. McBride's testimony?
No, sir, I have no questions.
Board members, any questions of Mr. McBride's testimony?
No questions.
Very good. Okay, you can take a seat.
All right, thank you.
Does anyone else want to provide any testimony? Very good. Okay. And here's what we're doing. We're closing testimony now, Mr. Long, just to tell you, and then you'll have the opportunity for a summation statement.
Thank you, sir.
Okay? So I have to read this into the record. Presentation of testimony and evidence is now closed, and summations are in order. The applicant is first, and then the hearing and record of this case is now closed, or, no, I'm sorry, the hearing and record of this case is not now closed. That's after your summation. So Mr. Long, if you would like to provide a summation for your case, now's the time to do so.
Thank you, sir. As I stated at the very beginning of this session, I am here to address the code, 158.043. I am here to oppose paragraph B of that code, which basically says that Mr. Voigt, or his delegated representative, together with the highways director, will determine what constitutes a clear line of sight. That part of the code, in my opinion, needs to be thrown out and rewritten. The code is inadequate. It gives too much power to the government, and it needs to be spelled out in the code. If they're going to use the AASHTO guidelines for new construction as their standard, they should put that in the code. That's one point I want to make. The second point is that the photographs, well, the second point is Mr. Voigt has delegated his authority and responsibility on many occasions. My suggestion and comment is that Mr. Voigt should not delegate his you can delegate responsibility, you can't delegate authority. And he's over-delegated, even to the point where he had Kirsten Eggerl make entries into the investigation report based on a conversation that I had with him. He asked Ms. Eggerl to make that entry. He also relied on Ms. Eggerl meeting with the Director of Highways and relied on their photographs, etc., rather than, as the code states, the zoning administrator shall determine, in conjunction with the Carroll County Bureau of Roads Operations or its successor agency, whether an object constitutes an obstruction to vision. In conclusion, I would like to say that the AASHTO standard has been misapplied. It's a non-government organization that has developed that standard, has no authority, it's not in the code, and that is all I have to say.
Okay, the hearing and record of this case is now closed, and in accordance with the Open Meetings Act of Maryland, the board will now consider the case. Board members, who wants to start?
Eric.
First of all, I'd like to say, Mr. Long, that's a very nice fence. I don't know that I've seen a fence as nice as that one.
Thank you.
Secondly, I think an issue here is that the code says in 158.043 that the zoning administrator shall determine, in conjunction with the Carroll County Bureau of Roads Operation, whether an object constitutes an obstruction to vision. I believe from the testimony we've had that that's exactly what occurred in this situation. I think Mrs. Dorsey's comments were absolutely on target, and for me, the most powerful piece of information was our site visit. When we visited this site and came down Cloudy Drive, when Melvin stopped the car at the end, one could not look down Woodbine Road. You had to pull partway out into Woodbine in order to see south. So I thought Mrs. Dorsey's comments were on target. I think the pictures, exhibits 1 and 3, in my mind, it's clear that the car was not in the same place, because on one of them, the fence and the Cloudy Drive sign is aligned with the hood, and in the other one, it's aligned further back with the passenger's window. So I would be inclined to vote against the appeal.
Uphold.
What? Yeah, okay, to uphold the zoning administrator's decision.
Okay, who wants to go next?
David? You don't want to go. Are you ever going to go? I guess I'm going.
You're on the hook.
Okay, I don't have a whole lot more to add to Dr. Dunkelberger's testimony. I do agree that the compelling experience for me was the site visit. We did go to the bottom of Cloudy Drive. We circled around somehow, I'm not sure. We did see the extent of the fence as far down as it went. It looked to me to be about 100 yards down Cloudy on the, would be the north side of your property. When we came back up, I felt it was dangerous to have to pull out onto Woodbine Road. And I'm amazed that there haven't been fatalities there and crashes. I really am. I would say you're taking your life in your hands if you're going out there during rush hour traffic, whether people are going south to wherever they go, 70 and other environments or environs in Washington or wherever, and then coming back home. And I would bet that there are more than 10,000 cars, because that is a busy access road. That would be my bet. I don't know, but that doesn't influence my thinking in terms of whether or not the zoning administrator erred in making his determination. That being said, I'm going to vote to uphold Mr. Voigt's decision and find it appropriate. Oh, I want to make one other comment. The standards that are presented, you can argue, as you did, articulately, that they're only recommendations at most. They're not in the law. But there are other standards that we have to make judgments of in the course of our hearings about other things, not just site distances in the land use. And you use the best thing you got. What we got here is stipulated. I'm sure it's been used for many, many years. It's an articulated point by County Roads. If we didn't have that, I would feel that we were more out on a limb saying this is dangerous. But when I look at that and it says 30 miles an hour, and this is how many feet you got to be able to see, it makes perfect sense to me. And I think you're accurate. With the undulation of the road, it's virtually impossible to see that distance. But it's the only standard that we've got right now. Maybe it needs to be incorporated into the law, and maybe that's a consideration for the county to take when they do a revision of the code. And I'd be more than willing to support that. But in terms of the case before us today, I have absolute confidence in assessing the evidence as it's come before me and saying Mr. Voigt is correct.
And I would concur with that. I think that the reference to a AASHTO standard is merely suggests that our roads department have adopted a rational and reasonable standard that other organizations and other professionals and go by also, and that it's just not a seat of the pants judgment from the inspector that day, or a decision reached willy-nilly. I think what that tells us is that there is a reasonable, and you might not agree with the standard, but it's not capricious and arbitrary. I think it has some basis for, and I believe, I would say that when that intersection was created, it met that standard, because there was not a sufficient obstruction to the south to block the view of oncoming traffic. So what changed after that intersection was constructed that obstructed the vision, and it was the fence. And so I think it's clear that the obstruction is created by the fence, and therefore, by whatever standard one accepts, once that determination has been made, then that's an obstruction. And I think the notice of violation was in order.
Ms. Eckert?
I don't really have anything to add, other than, just to reiterate that the site inspection was very compelling. We were in the road, you needed to be in the road to be able to safely see making a left-hand turn onto Woodbine Road.
Okay, any other comments, board members?
I would just add one that I neglected. Mr. Long, in his testimony, because of his research into the standard that is used, indicated that it's used nationwide. It's not something that's just Carroll County or just Maryland. That was his testimony, that is a standard that's applied throughout the nation.
Okay, at this time, I will entertain a motion.
Somebody speak up.
I move that in case 6120, we uphold the zoning administrator's decision.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion to uphold the zoning administrator's decision as it relates to case number 6120. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and call for the question. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Our oral decision will become final upon a written decision, which will be issued within 30 days unless otherwise extended by this board. And the board's decision may be appealed by filing a petition for judicial review with the clerk of the circuit court for Carroll County in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 200, Title 7 of the Maryland Rules of Procedure. The appeal must be filed within 30 days of the date of the board's written decision. Thank you very much for your attention here today, and this BZA hearing is adjourned.